Hi and welcome to Easy Fishing. Well, I can't go fishing at the moment because I'm on a medical ban for driving. But there is a subject that's quite dear to my heart that I'd like to cover. And that is what I have christened the silly season. Now, what is the silly season, you might ask? Well, it's the season of the year when every time you open a fishing magazine, turn on YouTube, etc., you'll see adverts for the latest products. For now it'll be 2019, and they're always an improvement on last year's model. Reasons for this: obviously it's the commercial hard sell. I know companies have got to make a living, but I have serious reservations. It's also the time of year when you tend to see anglers jump from one sponsor to another. So for instance, last year you'll have seen someone all dressed up in, we'll say, Matrix gear, and this year they're in MAP, or someone's in Drennan and they're in MAP. You get the picture. And there they are, all dressed in their latest sponsor's outfit. And they're all singing the same hymn. And that hymn is that this company's gear is the best since sliced bread, regardless of the fact that last year they were saying that that company's products were the best thing since sliced bread. So I tend to take all this with a pinch of salt. The other thing you will notice is that most of the products are expensive, and because of my ethos towards fishing and the people I'm aiming at, and the people I aim my videos at are not people who spend £3,000+ on a pole, £1,000 on a seat book. I'm aiming what I would call ordinary anglers, and I have asked some of these companies in their YouTube videos in the comment section if they would consider doing videos using the lower end products. One company did reply and said, oh yes, one of our guys using a £1,000 pole. Now admittedly these are aimed at matchmen who tend to be willing to spend huge amounts of money, but that's no good for the likes of us who don't have £1,000 to spend on a pole, and I dare say our wives, sweethearts, bank balances, whatever, won't allow it. So I hope to see the day when sponsors will show their lower end products. Now there are some that do. My favourite is Drennan, as you all know who are regular watchers, but I do use a lot of other people's gear. Drennan, for example, used John Arthur and Dan Varney to promote their Red Range 11-metre carp pole, which I still maintain is probably the best beginner's long pole anywhere, and at a reasonable price, £220. The wife is far more liable to swallow that than if you say, oh yes darling, I've just spent £1,999 on a fishing rod. You know the scenario. So you will also see people saying or giving what they view are the best products of the year. And that's what I'd like to get into, and I am aiming at you, the normal everyday guy or woman whose bank balance does not allow them to spend money like water. So for 2019, what would I say are great buys? Well, if we start off with rods, general float fishing rods are available from most of the major manufacturers. I love Drennan's Red Range 13-foot float rod. For a combination of finesse and power, I don't think that can be beat. So I'll stick by my recommendations. Want a cheap float rod? The Drennan 13-foot Red Range float is a lovely little rod. I'm sure if Drennan got Alan Scott on to use it, he would catch as many fish as he would using his top of the range acolytes. Poles. Well, there are a lot of poles on the market. Don't turn off now because I've said the word poles, because I know a lot of people don't like poles. Forget what you see in the magazines. A pole is a vital bit of equipment. It doesn't have to be a long one. We'll say up to about 9 metres, 6 to 9 metres. What's good? If you've got the money, I still say that Tricast's XRS is the 9 metre pole on the market. There's a new model out. It's about £350, which by pole standards is very cheap. And while I appreciate everybody can't afford that, I will give you an alternative. But if you can afford that money, that's a great pole. Top twos are about £60 or thereabouts, and they are readily available from Tricast dealers. And if they haven't got them in stock, they are quick to get them in. Going down from the range, I've been testing now for 18 months a pole from MIDI. I'm not prepared to say anything more about it because I haven't completed my testing on it. It's a very good pole. It's just over £100 or 120 with a spare top. And like I say, I will give a full report on that when I've finished. But for someone who wants one pole that will do everything, I still say that the Drennan's Series 7 margin carp is the pole to buy. It's 8.5 metres, so it's not super long and makes it hard for people to handle. You don't need two dirty great rollers to carry around to use with it. The spares are very cheap. The pole's been around a long time now in pole terms, and it shows no signs of abating. They're on eBay. You can get them for about £119. If that is your budget, and I think that's a very reasonable price for a pole, buy one. Spare sections are again pretty cheap. I think they're less than £30 for top twos, and the top twos come pre-bush, so you don't really have to mess around cutting it. You can just put an elastic and a bung in it and away you go. And I have done a video covering that for those who are worried about it. What else? Pole floats. Now, people immediately think pole floats you use with poles. Well, that's not the case. Pole floats can be used at close range for both running water and on still waters. My favourite pattern, without a doubt, is for an all-rounder that is the Drennan Margin Crystal and the Drennan Crystal Dibber. But Drennan have just released a slightly heavier margin float, and it has one of these new pretty much indestructible metal stems, titanium steel or something. It's in the videos promoting it. They show it being bent round till it touches the bristle without kinking, and combined with the other advantages, an almost indestructible paint job, a very strong side eye mounted on a strengthening spigot and a hollow tip, they look like a winner to me. Now, I haven't used them myself yet, but I see no reason why they won't live up to the usual Drennan standard. Any other items? Well, there's been quite a an influx of videos and articles on fishing the long whip. Now I have a couple of longer whips. I have a 6 metre one, and I have a very old ancient Daiwa Connoisseur, which is a superb whip. These longer whips, incidentally, are the top 3 sections are telescopic, and below that they are take apart. To use. Now I've had a waggle with the Drennan Acolyte 8 metre pole, looks great, but these long poles these long whips are not cheap. I think the Drennan's somewhere around the 280 mark with a spare top 3. So going back to what normal people will consider spending, I've done an awful lot of videos with an £8 whip. 3 metre glass fibre, a leader I think it is, excellent. All you have to do is glue a connector onto the end, and again I've done a video showing that. Can't go wrong with that. Stepping up in quality and price a little bit, if you look at Garbolino, Preston, Census and quite a few other manufacturers, they all offer a good range of whips in the 3 to 6 metre bracket, and the one that I would pick for anybody wanting a slightly longer whip is a 5 metre one by Leader. It is a carbon whip with a flick tip, and I've seen them for £35, and I think for that kind of price they are to be recommended. You can't really go wrong at that price. I think it's called a GTX, and it's a 5 metre telescopic, so it'll be pretty versatile. You can use that on rivers, lakes, canals, anywhere. And if you are into simplistic fishing, they are incredibly effective. And it seems that now with the river anglers praising the long whip and saying how great it is, the fact that you'll see them videos of a guy on a river wire, he's got a 9 metre whip in his hand and he's got 4 others, disregard that, because the likes that's like £1,000 for a set of whips, where you and I don't think can really justify that. I certainly can't, and I don't think the vast majority of my viewers can. Reels, right. Again, there's been a fair few reels. If you've got a deep pocket, the new Daiwa TDRs are absolutely superb, and they're castism, I think you pronounce it. Excellent reels. For more my kind of price bracket, I still say the Drennan Series 7 rear drag fixed balls at sub £40 take a lot of beating. They also do a front drag range for about £60 that are equally good. Both of them models come with a very shallow spool that takes 100 yards of line, which is something that all manufacturers should offer, but many still do not. The only downside I can find on these Drennan reels is I don't particularly like the line clips. They function fine, but I would like to see a better one. Please, Mr. Drennan. And also, please, Mr. Drennan, if you watch this, which I doubt, can you introduce a 5,000 size reel with a shallow spool that takes about 150 yards of 010 braid? Please, would be very nice. Hook boxes. Still say the Guru's the best on the market at the moment. They've introduced a new model, but regrettably they still haven't done what I want, so I won't be buying it, which is to incorporate a set of stainless steel pins so that hooks down to size 24 say can be put on them, because even with the new model with shallower pegs, a size 24 Drennan will not fit on them. And people say, oh yes, I can fit a size 22 Guru on it. Well, you look at a size 22 Guru compared to a size 22 Drennan, then there's a big difference. Going on from that, I see Preston of like pumping out gear as usual. Yes, another range of poles, blah blah blah. Why these manufacturers will not stick to a range of poles and have them going for a few years before they replace them, I do not know. But that is a sad fact of life. I can't comment on them. I've no doubt they are the latest poles are the bee's knees, as they claim. I bet they're beautiful to fish with, blah blah blah. But how many of us can afford to change our poles every year? I'm certainly not one of the lucky ones who can, and I bet 99% of the people who watch this video are in the same boat. It's very difficult nowadays to find a pole manufacturer that sticks to the same model. Drennan did release a new flagship, Acolyte Pro, but I'm not going to go into that because it's £3,000. Lovely pole, no doubt, but too much money. Regrettably, it seems that they've dropped the Red Range RX pole from their model lineup, I guess due to poor sales. Not because there was anything wrong with the pole. In fact, I've had a go with one and I thought for the money it was a lovely pole, but the market is absolutely rammed with lower end, we'll say, not being derogatory, but lower end poles, and the Drennan just couldn't find its way into that market. But I bet a lot of the people who've bought these other poles, in 2 years' time when a section breaks and they can't get a spare for it, they will be regretting it. But never mind. Other products. Drennan have brought out a new range of Avon rods, which are lovely, no doubt. I won't be buying them because I have about 4 John Wilson Avons. In fact, I think I've got 5. One is a very old model, and 2 of them are the 1113s, and 2 of them are the Barber 1113s. And quite honestly, for the gain in performance, I'm not willing to pay out the kind of money because they are a very versatile rod. What else has really struck me this year? I'm just trying to think. There's nothing really jumped out and grabbed me that I think is brilliant. There's a lot of products that I can see that could be improved to be made really good, but that sort of thing. I would love Drennan to bring out a new hook box. I really would, with pins fine enough to take small hooks and build it on Guru lines. Waterproof seals, magnetic closing, lovely hook boxes. What else? There's not really a great deal of movement on the market. One thing I am disappointed in, my Octopus seat box, my super stool, one of the seat catches is broken and I'm having trouble locating a new one. So when I get one, I'll probably be moving that on to somebody who needs a cheap seat box. With regret, because I think it's a great little seat box. If they'd sorted out, carried on developing it, would have been wonderful. But the company that took over from Mel Wild, the plastic box company or whatever, they don't seem to be interested in fishing tackle. Shame, but there you go. Other than that, I can't really think of anything that's grabbed me. One product I'm a bit surprised hasn't been taken up more is Barclay's Nano line. Now, I've been using Nano line since it came out and it's absolutely brilliant. It's virtually the same thickness as a braid, but it's not a braid. It casts better than braid because it's got a smoother surface, doesn't get abraded so badly, and you can use it on braid band waters because it's not a braid. Someone said to me, yes, it's a braid. I turned around to him and show me where the braided fibres are. And he looked at it and had to admit that, yes, there are no braided fibres in it because it's fused into a monofilament. I'm surprised that hasn't taken up. Price-wise, it's not much more than any other manufacturer's braid in a 125 yard spool. It's also available in 270-yard spools, which I tend to buy it on. Its only drawback is because the surface is so slick, you have to be careful with knots. But it has become my standard feeder line, and as my braided lines that I've been using for years wear out, I will be changing them to nano line. Other than that, Drennan introduced a fairly hook resistant landing net that looks interesting. It's not for me though, don't need one. Corum. Now Corum are a funny company. They have good products sometimes and then seem to drop them out the blue. Don't know why. I spoke to the reps at last year's show and they were saying, oh, if it doesn't sell, they'd stop it. Well, it's a very short-sighted view because they've done a couple of really good products that didn't need to be dropped. But this year they've caught my eye with a folding landing net, a spoon job. Now I already have one, you've seen it's a 22-inch spoon, has performed satisfactorily, but I would like a bigger one, and they do it in a 30-inch spoon with a stronger frame. Looks pretty decent, but I'll have to have a good look at it before I shell out. It's not that expensive, low £20 I think, and spoon nets are pretty good, and as long as it's got a coated mesh that doesn't absorb water, I'll probably risk the money on it. Guru again, Steve Ringer seems to be still staying with Guru, and in conjunction with Dyer, where they're pushing a range of new feeder rods and float rods. I do not doubt they are superb bits of equipment. Met Steve Ringer a few times and he seems a very amiable kind of chap. He's huge, by the way. I didn't realise how big he was until I met him a few years ago. And no doubt he will continue to provide good feedback to Guru. What else can I say? I'm still in love with Guru QM1 hooks. For when I go on a commercial water, they are my go-to method feeder hook. They are lovely. The only other alternative to that is the Drennan's carp feeder, for me anyway, but everybody has their own patterns. What else can I say? If you're still on the lookout for a reasonable priced equipment, Garbolino do some that are worth a look. Their rocket range and their lower end range, they're actually very cheap. I think you're talking about £30 or less for some of the shorter models. And I have had a waggle. I've had a waggle and a quick couple of casts with, I think it was called a rocket waggler, and it was actually a superb rod for the money. And I think at the time it was less than £25. So if you're in the market for a pellet waggler rod, that's a nice one. There are one rod I would love to have but couldn't justify the cost, is Drennan's 17-foot Acolyte float. If I lived next to a river with some flow in it, it would probably be my #1 choice for stick float. But as I don't, I can't justify it. What else can I say? Well, there's undoubtedly loads of new gear in the market. One thing I have noticed, touching on it, is the hook baits and ground baits. Sonu baits and a few others, but especially Sonu seem to be having a big push. And I have to admit their ground baits are pretty good. As with all of these modern ground baits, they are not cheap, but you see guys mixing, and they got 2 bags of this, 2 bags of that, and 1 bag of another. Well, that, you know, at £4 a bag, that makes it an expensive bit of ground bait. But they can be diluted quite cheaply, and things like molehill soil, which I tend to use a lot on deeper waters, is very, very good. Do not dismiss some of these continental ground baits. They are good. But you can take brown crumb in both fine and coarse consistencies, dye it, flavour it, add stuff to it. But that's a subject I'll cover in the future. Other than that, all I can say is I cannot wait to get out on the bank, because I hate being housebound like this. Regrettably, I can't even see a float, or I could just about see a quiver tip, I think, but I couldn't see a float. I can't even watch TV because I can't see the TV unless it's like 3 foot from the end of my nose. So anyway, I hope that's all been of interest to you. I know it's only my thoughts and my opinions, and there will undoubtedly be loads and loads of people who will disagree, but I'll not push something unless I think it's worth it. I like manufacturers that keep products on the market. I really dislike manufacturers that bring out a new model, tell everybody it's the best thing since sliced bread, and then next year it's dropped. And the people who've been left holding the dummy, so to speak, or the baby, tend to be, I think you're being ripped off. But that's my own personal opinion. Some people have to have everything new that comes out. And over the years of fishing, I've learnt not to be. When I get back on the bank, I intend to try and do a push to do more videos. I hopefully will go into the Big One show, so if I see any of you there, please come up and say hello. It's nice to meet people, and any feedback you want to offer is, as long as it's not abusive, will always be welcomed. So until next time, tight lines.